Welcome back to Conference 2020, our first conference. And sitting next to me is Juliette. Juliette, we know each other for a long time, right?
Oh yes, we indeed.
Yes.
I'm trying to think how long, but let's not give away that kind of details.
Exactly. So Juliette is here and she's going to be talking a bit, or actually we are going to be talking a bit about the effect that a new major version of PHP has on open source projects. So this is going to be a conversation, and you can join in on this conversation if you want. Just post your questions in the Discord. I have an iPad here. I will switch to the Discord every once in a while to see if there are any questions from you, and we can, put that smoothly into the conversation.
We're going to try at the very least.
Yeah,
yes.
we're going to try. Okay,
Yeah.
we're going to see how smoothly it will go, but we're going to try.
And while it's about PHP, I mean, the same principle of what we're talking about also applies to other tooling.
Yeah.
So whether you use Python or JavaScript, or basically anytime a big major new version comes out, you will find that these same principles which apply to PHP will also apply in your specific field.
Yeah, exactly. Okay. Juliette, I'm going to let you open up the conversation.
Well, okay. So Stefan, do you know when PHP 8 is coming out?
I think it's going to be the end of the year, November or something.
Yeah.
There we go.
Mark the date, November 26th. And you might now think, oh, that's still quite a bit away, Good 3 more months, true.
Yeah.
And most of the time, most applications most servers won't switch to PHP 8 straight away. I mean, we'll wait till 8.1, 8.01, 8.02 has come out before we even consider switching to PHP 8, don't we?
Yes. Well, yes, of course.
So you'd think you'd have some time still.
Yes.
So let's have a look what the timeline is. So generally PHP brings out a new version every month, one new patch version once a major or a minor has come out. So if we look at an application which wants to be live, say February, then by when PHP 8 comes out, November, December, you start preparing that application.
Yes.
And then by February, March, you can put it in production. Okay, but hang on, a lot of applications use open source software underneath. So an accounting application might use something like PHP Spreadsheet as part of their development stack. So open source projects generally have to be ready a bit earlier.
Yeah.
And for both goes that the QA tools you use, like PHPUnit, which most projects use to run the unit test, need to be ready even earlier, because when you want to start getting ready for PHP 8, they already have to be ready to allow you to test.
Yes. Yeah.
So this is why I'm talking with you about this. Yes, for a lot of people, PHP 8 is still, at least 6 months away, if not, 3-4 months away.
Yeah.
For people who work on QA tools, we're trying to get ready now, if not are ready now. PHPUnit actually released version 9.3 August 6th, and that was the first version officially ready for PHP 8.
Yes, so that's the release date. So that means that the PHPUnit team has been working on that for a couple of months before that release date already.
Absolutely, and they released it only, correct me if I'm wrong, I think about a week after the feature freeze, after PHP 8 went into feature freeze, when the first beta was released. And let's be fair, it isn't in full feature freeze yet, because things like attributes are still being discussed, and I kind of expect there still to be a change before the end of the year.
Right. So you mentioned already PHPUnit, but I'm sure that's not the only QA tool that's out there. And I know that you also work on some of those tools. Can you give us an example of the tools that we're talking about here? What are the tools that people may use every day that they don't really think of, that have to start developing, months ago already to prepare for this new version?
Oh, luckily I've prepared a slide for that. Okay, so first of all, we're talking PHP 8.
Yeah.
A typical QA stack, and I know not every project uses QA tools, but a typical QA stack for a project which does would look something like this. So you have PHPUnit for your testing, you have PHPCS or CS Fixer for your code style, and possible some of the QA checks, like, are parameter names long enough, and things like that. You might have PHPStan and Psalm for some additional QA checks. And you might have something like PHPDocumentor to open up your code documentation, to open up your API to the world.
Yeah.
Obviously, if we're talking PHP world, nearly everything installs on Composer.
Yes.
So we're also talking Composer. And hang on, but PHPUnit and PHPCS, and don't they all release a FAR as well?
Yes.
Yes, and to release a FAR and not cause conflicts with other application installs, you need something like PHP Scoper underneath the hood during your FAR build process. Yes. And then all of these also use PHP extensions. So if we look at PHP extensions, you have the maintained extensions maintained by the PHP core team, like Opcache. But you also have extensions which aren't maintained. Mm-hmm. There's currently, for instance, no active maintainer for IconV, and I'm not just talking IconV, but also XML Writer, Simple XML. There's quite a long list at the moment. If ever you wanted to learn C, now is the time. There's actually a proposal, it's in draft at the moment, but there's a proposal to remove all the non-maintained extensions from PHP, and we're talking a list of about 40 extensions. So this is huge.
I'm hearing things like Simple XML, which a lot of people are using.
FTP extension is unmaintained.
Right.
SPL is unmaintained.
Ah.
I'm not making this up.
Okay. If you want to learn a new language, please learn C. Yes.
So, having said that, these are still the extensions which ship with PHP itself. Then on top of that, you have the extensions which are hosted on Peckle, which are outside of PHP. Peckle is part of the PHP project, the larger project, but they don't automatically ship with PHP, and they still also have to be ready. And especially Xdebug, which I mentioned there, is one of those tools which is also used by all the developers who develop these tools.
Yeah, yeah.
So, yeah, and let's make it one layer more complex yet.
Oh yeah, okay.
Because we have this whole tool stack, but this whole tool stack has dependencies as well. So the dependencies of all these projects also need to be ready.
Yeah, yeah.
So we're really talking about a significant part of the invisible projects in the PHP world, which most people use every day, but don't even think about that they're being maintained by someone, which have to be ready.
Yeah. Yes, because when I do a Composer install a new project, I install one library. Sometimes there's a whole list of things that get installed with that one library that I need.
Absolutely.
So that's all these developers should already be working on PHP 8 now.
Yes and no. The thing is, most of these projects are cross-version compatible. Okay. In other words, a PHPUnit 9 can be run on PHP 7.3, 7.4 and 8. PHPCS can be run on PHP 5.4 until 7.4 and working on 8. So these projects are cross-version compatible, so you don't have to actually develop with the feature set of PHP 8 yet. You just have to make sure it's compatible. It will run without errors.
Yeah.
Slightly different nuance.
Okay, but still, if even one of those components still has some kind of compatibility issue, that means that everything on top of that won't work anymore.
Yes, and it's not just if they have an issue. It also means even if they fixed it, have they tagged a new release yet, a new stable release?
Right.
Because, for instance, one of the PHPUnit 9.3 dependencies hasn't got a stable release yet.
Okay.
And I mean, it will install, and if you use the file, you don't even notice it. But you can't just expect it to install if you have, for instance, prefer stable as your default setting.
Does that mean that if I want to install PHPUnit 9.3 at this point, I have to allow dev packages?
I'd have to check. I was testing some things yesterday, and I think I ran into that, but then again, they may have found a way around that. So it might just have been because I was doing awkward things. I was debugging something related but different and pretty complex.
Right, okay.
Trying to figure out where the version break was.
Check, okay. What kind of, things need to be done to be compatible with PHP 8?
Well, basically, let's take hang on. Well, I need to scroll forward. Getting ready for a normal project.
Yeah.
Basically, you need to make your own code compatible, and quite often people will want to support one or two versions of PHP, so 7.4 and 8, so they can still have patches for production in 7.4 while they're getting ready for 8. And you have to make sure that your dependencies are compatible. That's a normal project.
Yes. Like the projects I work on a day-to-day basis.
And up to a point, some of these QA tools as well.
Okay.
And I mean, Ewout, who will be here later, will know that much better than me. I don't know the under the hood of PHPUnit, but for PHPUnit, if you just run test and not run code coverage, this is their stack as well.
Right. Yeah. But how do you ensure if your dependencies are compatible?
Well, first you need to initialize them. So let's have a look at PHPUnit and the dependencies they have. Okay, so first you have a few dependencies on actual PHP extensions. So those extensions need to be compatible.
Yeah.
Then you have your primary dependencies. And that includes 5 packages managed by PHPUnit organization and 10 managed by Sebastian himself, so, totaling about 15 packages. But those packages, again, have dependencies. Including 4 more PHP extensions. So first you need to know this whole stack. Then you need to test with them. You need to possibly report bugs to those projects. You need to work with the owners of those projects, possibly send in patches. Work with these people, with the maintainers of these packages, to get the packages ready and get them tagged and released with a PHP 8 ready version, including allowing installation on PHP 8. Because some package will say, okay, well, we're preparing for PHP 8, we sort of know that we're okay, but we're not 100% sure, so we don't officially support PHP 8.
Right.
So their PHP requirement in their composer require still says a maximum of 7.4.
So you cannot install it on 8?
Well, you can, but you need to ignore platform requirements.
Exactly, you have to force it.
Yeah.
Okay. What if one of those, because I spot some extensions, for instance, that you just mentioned, might not have a maintainer anymore. What happens when you depend on something that does not have a maintainer?
You have a choice. Fork it and start maintaining it yourself, or find someone else to do it.
Right. Yeah. Or rewrite your code to not have that dependency anymore, but that might be a lot of work.
Yeah. I mean, another tool which I haven't mentioned so far, for instance, is PHP parallel lint. A lot of projects used it. It's actually really useful because it lints PHP far faster than the PHP native linter, because it uses the PHP native linter but does under the hood parallelization. So it's about 5 to 10 times faster.
Right.
And it visualizes the actual parse errors which it finds in a way which is readable. It gives you a code diff. It tells you this is where the parse error is and shows you the code. So it's useful.
Yeah.
For quite a long time, they weren't compatible with PHP 7 full. I'd sent in a patch in August last year, and they weren't merging. They weren't merging. I basically decided I'm going to give it 6 months.
Right.
And then just before the 6 months were finished, by that time 7.4 had been released. Someone who had contributed to the project before said, okay, I'm going to step up, I'm going to officially fork it, create a PHP parallel lint organization, and I'm going to accept these patches which have been sent in already.
Right.
And I mean, the maintainer isn't extremely active, but he does accept patches, and it's not, nothing stays open for 6 months.
Right.
It's maybe a month, and he does release new versions.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Sounds like we have an open source hackathon tomorrow. It sounds like that might be a good thing to work on, PHP 8 compatibility.
Definitely. Well, it's definitely interesting to have a look, but the thing is, before you start working on PHP 8 compatibility, you need to know what is going to break.
Yes, yeah, that's true.
And it's not about all the new features. The new features are fun, but you're not going to be able to use it if your application still needs to be cross-version compatible. So it's what's going to break, what you need to focus on for initially.
I just saw that Mark Baker responded, basically talking about exactly what we are talking about. He says,
for the people who don't know, Mark Baker is the developer who maintains PHP spreadsheet, which I mentioned as a potential dependency of user-land applications.
And he mentions, I got the shout out for PHP spreadsheet, but before I can make that PHP 8 ready, I need to upgrade some of the dependencies as well. And 2 of those will require a branch split because they also support PHP 5.6. So I need to split a 5.6 plus branch and a 2 plus branch. And that comes down to changes in PHPUnit. So
don't get me started.
Just to give an example of the amount of work that needs to be done to get dependencies updated so that they can release a new version.
Well, there are ways to make a test suite which is not too complex compatible with PHPUnit 5 to 9, because that, for PHPCS or for some of the projects built on top of PHPCS, I run test suites like that.
Right.
But as soon as the complexity of your test suite is slightly larger, it becomes incrementally more expensive to do so, and incrementally more complex to do so.
Right.
So I had interesting discussions this week about the need to drop support for PHP 5.6 with a big player in the PHP market.
Yes, yes, exactly. There are projects that have a strong resistance against dropping support for older versions.
Yes. Well, and up to a point, I understand it. I mean, one of the projects I'm involved with is PHP compatibility. We support PHPCS all the way back to PHPCS 2.6. And we support PHP 5.4. Well, actually, we still support 5.3. We're only dropping 5.3 support in the very next release.
Okay.
Which is version 10.
Yeah.
In which already we're supporting PHP 8 as well.
Mm-hmm.
Why are we doing this? Well, partially because there's hosts which use tools like PHP compatibility to run over all the code on a certain server to know which customers they need to contact to tell them, look, we want to move you to a server with a higher PHP version, and we're pretty sure your code's not going to be compatible, or you really need to do some work on it.
Right.
And I mean, PHP compatibility can't find everything. It's static analysis. Something like the runtime value of variables is not available to us. But we can find a lot.
Yeah, yeah.
So if you're still using MySQL, yeah, we can find that.
Yeah.
But things like with PHP 8, where a lot of warnings and notices are being changed to catchable exceptions, in other words, if you don't catch them, fatal errors, nearly all of those changes are to do with runtime value of variables. And that's something we just cannot find.
Yeah.
So an example is that every PHP native function has types. So, you know, they expect a string for something, or they expect an array for a certain parameter. And as long as it was within a certain range, they would juggle. They would type juggle and be very tolerant. That tolerance is gone with PHP 8.
Yeah.
So, and if I continue about PHP compatibility, the code of PHP compatibility, save for two small things, was already ready for PHP 8. The only two things we had to change was somewhere where under the hood vsprintf was being called, and vsprintf expects the replacements for the string as an array, and in two places we were passing it as a string. That
Right.
worked fine without notices or warnings in PHP 5 and 7. As of PHP 8, that's a fatal error,
Yeah.
catchable exception.
But still, there's gonna be quite an impact with things like this for a lot of projects.
Yeah, and the only way to catch these kind of things reliably, in my opinion, is by testing. And
Right.
for a lot of people, that means expanding their unit test suite. I mean, yes, you might have 80% coverage and think you're covered. Not with this. That's not going to be enough.
Okay.
You really are going to have to step up, expand the unit test suite, specifically test on type handling. If your application has any risk of loose type and type juggling behavior. For an application like PHP compatibility, which is in the QA tool chain, I mean, we didn't have much of that problem. We only had two issues. Because as you would expect, tools in the QA chain generally actually do quite a lot on QA for their own code.
Right.
So PHPUnit or PHPDocumentor or PHPStan, generally speaking, those kind of projects will have very few cross-version compatibility issues because the code is already good.
Yeah.
Something like, well, let's not make it an unnamed big CMS, which is literally stringed together from loose types, will have a much bigger problem.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I can
And
imagine.
if their test coverage isn't 100%, or even 200%, because yeah, test coverage isn't everything. Please watch my talk from DPC about PHPUnit. Let's not go into that any deeper than that. But yeah, you need to raise your test coverage. You need to really expand your test suite to catch these kind of errors.
Right.
Because you're not going to be able to do that with just manual testing, not with an application of any conceivable size.
Yeah. So you already mentioned some of the tools, the QA tools already are pretty good in terms of code. Are there any things that you need to do extra on top of what most people need to do to upgrade for tools like PHP Code Sniffer? Are there any extra things that you need to do to get your code ready?
Most definitely. Yeah, well, in case anyone says like, oh, how does he know what our slides are going to be? Yeah, no, we did talk this through beforehand. We didn't prepare the interview. We didn't actually talk through everything. Well, we didn't talk what we were going to say. But we did discuss the general line of the conversation.
Exactly.
So, yeah.
Exactly.
Okay, so for PHP Code Sniffer, aside from the basic steps which every application needs to do, there's more. Because PHP Code Sniffer still supports PHP 5.4.
Yeah.
So something like a new token in PHP 8, think, hang on, we have the null save object operator. That needs to be backfilled. So that if you scan PHP 8 code while you're running on PHP 5.6, the result will be the same as if you're running scanning on PHP 8 and looking at PHP 5.6 code.
Yeah.
So cross-version compatibility means whatever version you run it on, it has to give the same result. So sometimes you need to polyfill a token, sometimes you need to backfill it. For null safe operator, basically, if it doesn't exist, we need to walk the tokens, check, okay, could this be a null safe operator, and then retokenize the file, or, well, those tokens in the file.
Yeah.
And this is a simple example. I mean, arrow functions from PHP 7.4, especially, you know, with it not having a clear ending delimiter, that was a nightmare, and we're still finding bugs. I mean, I'm really, really hoping that attributes is going to be changed to have an end delimiter, because I honestly despair to think how we're ever going to be able to backfill this properly if it doesn't.
Yeah, because basically what you're saying is if your code, your QA tool code, needs to understand PHP code that is not written in the version of the PHP that you're running on at that point.
Yeah. Shall I make it one level more complex still?
Sure, go ahead.
Now think of PHP compatibility, which runs on top of PHP code sniffer and detects PHP incompatibilities. You tell it which test version to give. So I want my code to be compatible with 5.6 and up. And it will run through your code and try to detect those incompatibilities. And it will do that with all those PHP versions and all those PHPCS versions I mentioned. So even those PHPCS versions where the backfill is not yet in place and we have to do it ourselves anyway.
Right. That's okay. How do you still keep track of all of that?
With difficulty.
Yeah, I can imagine, because that sounds really, really complex to keep track of, you know, which version am I running on, which version are we testing for, and especially if you're testing 5, 6 and up, that's a whole lot of different versions that have different,
It helps to have a very complete test suite and to run those tests on every single build. And PHPCS, in some ways, it's actually easy to write tests for that. And I've gotten to the point that I can write the most horrific code to be able to test whether sniffs actually still work properly.
Yeah.
And I mean, I always hope that nobody writes code like that in production. Then I see an issue being reported about something not being tokenized correctly. And the code's even worse than what I could ever imagine people writing.
Okay.
I'm not saying it's wrong. It just makes our life a bit more interesting.
Interesting. Yeah, exactly, exactly.
But with PHP Code Sniffer, it's not just the tokenizer, because you might think, like, if the tokenizer is fixed, then all the sniffs work correctly.
Yeah.
Were you thinking that?
Well, I could be thinking that, yes.
We also have to adjust the sniffs. And what I mean by that is prevent false positives and prevent false negatives. So we were talking about null safe object operator earlier. With a null safe object operator, say there is a sniff which looks at global function calls. So it will discount a function call if it's preceded by an object operator, because then it's a method and not the global function.
Yeah.
Now with the null safe object operator, we need to make sure that if that precedes the function call, it also is discounted and doesn't report the error, because again, it's not the global function.
Yeah.
So that's preventing false positives.
Mm-hmm.
On the other side, you have a sniff specifically about object operator spacing. You know, you should not have any white space between the variable and the object operator, and no white space between the object operator and whatever comes after it. Or you should have, you know, if you chain it, you should have a new line and your indentation should be a certain way. Those kind of sniffs need to be adjusted to start checking the null safe object operator, to make sure that they also check the spacing around those and fix those correctly.
Right. This blows my mind.
Shall I make it yet one more complex?
Go ahead.
Okay, so if we then look at PHP compatibility on the one hand, it depends on the tokenizer from PHP CS, but on the other hand, sometimes, you know, for older PHP versions and PHPCS versions, we might still need to do some backfilling ourselves. So that's the one side. We need to make sure that our sniffs, the current sniffs, are compatible the way I just explained. So if we are looking, for instance, to see if we're looking at parameter types, PHP 8 introduces mixed parameter type, and as part of mixed, or as part of union types, false and null.
Yeah.
So one of the sniffs we have is check parameter types, and obviously we're going to need to check for those. But we also need to make sure that false and null, for instance, wouldn't be used as a singular non-union type, and we give errors depending on version. So if you want to support 5.6, we should tell you, hang on, but int is not supported yet as a parameter type. But if you then use int or false as a union type in PHP 8 syntax, we should still give that error both for int as well as false. So
Right.
that's existing sniffs.
Yeah.
Then we need to write new sniffs to detect everything PHP 8.
Yes, of course, because there's new features, so there's new sniffs.
And also new breakages.
Yeah.
There's new functions which are being deprecated. There's something like, I think the unset typecast that was deprecated in 7 somewhere, and it's now removed. There's more, the curly array access braces. So if you use array access with curly braces, that was deprecated in 7.4, it's removed in 8. So all those sniffs, those already have sniffs, but they need to be adjusted to make sure that they now give an error instead of a warning, because it's no longer deprecated, it's actually removed. But also new functions, but hang on, if you already have your own function defined with that name, you should be warned that you need to rename your function.
Yeah. Yeah.
Or similar to match. Match has now become a new reserved keyword because of match expressions, which is the first time a new control structure is being introduced since try-catch in 5.
Yeah, right.
And, you know, it's one of the big problems if people who up to now could still use their test suite and use PHPUnit to run on 7.4, even though not officially supported. They can't do that on 8 because in PHPUnit 7.4, some of the mocking dependencies of PHPUnit had a class named match and functions named match. And because it's now a reserved keyword.
That's not possible anymore. No.
And that's why PHPUnit 7 doesn't work on PHP 8.
Right. Yeah. That makes it so much more interesting. Also, of course, for people's own custom code, because if they were using something like match in their code,
we need to tell them. Well, with PHP compatibility, we try to make sure to give people warning and errors for those kind of things. Obviously, I mean, people need to choose to run it. I realized the other day that we've actually crossed the 2 million downloads now, so it is definitely being used.
Yeah.
And we detect a fair number of things. I mean, as I say, it's static analysis. We don't have access to runtime values of variables. But with static analysis, we can still detect a lot. Like, you know, there's a parameter which used to be optional, now it's required. We will warn you about that.
Right.
Or a parameter which used to accept multiple types and now only accept another type. A lot of the time we will be able to detect this and will warn you when you see that. Sniffs are a lot smarter than people think. At some point I was told, like, hang on, but I didn't expect the sniff to be able to detect that. Oh, yeah. This was something about function getArgs, where there was a change in PHP 7 that if you didn't use it at the start of the function and you changed any of the parameters which had been passed to the function before you called that function, you would get the real value, not the value as it entered the function, which was the PHP 5 behavior.
Yeah.
And we did a lot of work to try and prevent false positives and to try to lower the annoyance factor. If we just throw an error for every single time we'd see function get args, people would turn the sniff off.
Yes. Yeah.
So like with debug, it was also debug backtrace. There's like a constant for debug backtrace. If you use that, it doesn't take the parameter value into account. So we can discount that function call already.
Yeah.
If people have 3 parameters defined, and then function get arg only looks at what after it with an array slice, for instance, then again we can count that call. And we put a lot of that kind of code in place, and yeah, someone was being very surprised that we'd correctly detected it wasn't a problem. It's like, but I wanted to check it. I wanted to be sure. Yeah, we checked it for you.
So this is interesting, because this basically means that in a sniff like that, you find an instance of some kind of usage of a function or whatever, and then Code Sniffer actually looks at the whole context to figure out
as much as we can.
As much as you can to figure out if you're using it correctly, basically.
Yeah, with this particular example, function get args, we will look between the start of the scope, the start of the function, to the point where the function is called. We will discount if there's like one of the parameters being used or retrieved is being used to name what you return from what's returned from function get args, and we will look above it. I mean, if there's a number of situations where you can say, okay, here people are just checking with an is set if that parameter is set, we can discount that. But there's also function calls which may or may not change the variable by reference. And we won't always know whether they do or don't. So unless we then have a huge register with all the functions and whether they pass by return by reference or not, we will give a warning, say this needs inspection. If you assign over the parameter, we will give an error because we know you're overwriting what was already there. For any other use, we will give a warning and we'll try to discount as much as possible. Someone reported the other day, like, if it's used in a return, it shouldn't be returned. And I'm like, yep, I agree, that's totally valid. Because if it's returned, then yeah, the variable's not changed and we never reach that call to function get args anyway. Same with exit or die. But other people were saying like, yeah, but if I use it in a really complex condition, I'm like, yeah, no. Especially with different operator precedents and everything, that becomes very complex at some point. We need to draw the line somewhere. So for those we give a warning, you need to inspect it.
Right, okay. So the whole parsing and figuring out the context of such a function usage, that's done, I think, with the tokenizers. So how does that work? Can you explain a bit more about the tokenization?
Basically, how much do you know about tokens?
Well, basically what I know is it breaks down the language into small pieces that you can then use to understand the code, basically?
Sort of, yes.
Sort of.
Okay. I do have some code samples which are, well, let's have a look at one of those code samples, just to give an idea. This is PHP 8 constructor property promotion. In the constructor you can declare properties. This is actually going to be interesting for PHPDocumentor as well, because the properties defined in the constructor should be documented as properties, but also as function parameters of the construct in a way. So, yeah.
Okay.
So they have a nice challenge there to how to handle this. But yeah, if we look at this file, you first have the PHP tag. That's T, token. Open tag.
Okay.
Very simple.
That makes sense.
Now, what would be next?
Well, the first thing I see is class. But I'm pretty sure the new line is probably also a token.
T white space.
There we go.
And then you have another T white space for the next new line.
Ah, so there's actually 2 tokens because there's 2 new lines.
Well, it depends. The PHP tokenize in a certain way, and PHPCS has its extra layer on top of that. So I won't always know which is the PHP way, which is the PHPCS way. But yeah, in PHPCS, you'll have a white space token per line in that case. Then you have T class, the class keyword, and again white space. And then you have a string, a T string, an identifier. And there's actually changes around identifiers in PHP 8 in how those are tokenized. So that's another challenge we have to deal with.
Yeah.
But yeah, so basically every part, every keyword, every part of the code is tokenized to a name, like this is what it is. And basically anything it doesn't really know is T-string, which makes T-string really horrible and really hard to work with. Yeah, it could be a method name, it could be a class name, could be a function name, could be an interface name, could be a namespace name. And yeah, the PHP 8 change is actually going to make life a little bit easier there. But with having to support various PHP versions, we're going to have a challenge for the foreseeable future until, PHP 8 would be the minimum. So maybe in 10 years' time.
That's optimistic.
Hey, gotta have goals somewhere.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I mean, like if we look at this code, public is a keyword, function is a keyword, construct is a T-string again. The parentheses within PHPCS are tokenized as T open parentheses, T close parentheses. You actually can match them with, the open parentheses will have a reference to the closed parentheses.
Right.
That's not default PHP, that's PHPCS. Some class again is T-string, but int is also T-string.
Oh, okay.
So a type is a type declaration will also be a T-string because it's something, but yeah.
You don't know what. Yeah.
Fun times.
Fun times, yes. I see a question coming by in our Discord. Does Juliette have an advice how we should improve a major version upgrade?
In what context?
In what context? I don't know.
Yeah, is this from how we can improve, as in from a PHP core dev point of view, how can we make it easier for userland projects to upgrade? Or is this from a QA point of view, like?
Well, given Jaap is one of the people working on PHPDocumentor, maybe he's talking about major version upgrades of PHPDocumentor.
No, sometimes it helps to keep up. And this is not criticism. I think the work they're doing is amazing. I've recently done some stress testing. And when you do stress testing, you obviously come across bugs. And one of the things I found was that, for instance, visibility for constants wasn't supported yet.
Okay.
And they probably have fixed it in the meantime. I mean, they are amazing. I love Mike and Jaap and all they're doing. But yeah, that was a change which had been released a while ago already and wasn't supported yet.
Okay.
So keeping up does help.
Okay. Jaap says, let's start with core dev. So what can we do to make major version upgrades for core better, easier?
Well, I think a lot has been done already. I mean, if I look back at, 10 years ago compared to now, I mean, there's an RFC process. Those RFCs are public, are easily accessible. It's completely transparent, whether they're in voting, whether they're waiting to be implemented, whether they've actually been implemented. Mm-hmm. You can see the PRs in the GitHub repo. You can see the tests they have for their code. So which is helpful to base our own tests on.
Right.
What do we need to detect? So the transparency of that process and the fixed dates which are pre-published, by mid-June we have the first alpha. By beginning of August, end of July, we'll have the first beta and the feature phrase. There may be one or two things which have been implemented which still need some tweaking, but after that it's bug fixes and what is it? Mid-September you have a release candidate, and then end of November we have the release.
Right.
It gives us, on the one hand, time. It gives us also a clear planning. So I can actually plan, like in June, okay, once the alpha comes out, I can start running tests.
Yeah.
Because I'm on Windows and I don't know how to build PHP. I don't really want to know. So and I'm totally respect the PHP team, and really am happy with the release leads of this release, because Microsoft withdrew as one of the people who used to maintain the Windows builds of PHP.
Yeah.
But so far, for every alpha and the betas, there has been a Windows build.
Okay.
So I did not have to try and find out how to do this, and with me, all the other Windows users who already test on PHP8, there has been Windows downloads to be had. Yeah. And that's very helpful.
This is an interesting thing, because we haven't really talked about that yet. You're building QA tools that have to, test code and make sure that everything is good. But there's, aside from all the version differences, there's also platform differences.
Oh yes. It's one of the reasons why I'm on Windows.
So you can check whether code runs on Windows as well?
Lowest common denominator. If it works on Windows, chances are it will work on Linux fine.
Right, okay. Okay.
Similar, why do I use Pale Moon as a browser? If it works in Pale Moon, chances are it will work everywhere else. If you keep the lowest common denominator into account, the one basically which is most difficult, and that's your default, then it's not the exception anymore. And I'm not saying this will work every time, but it works a lot of the time. Right.
So if it doesn't break in Windows, the chances are big that it works in any of the other platforms. Yeah. That's basically what you're saying. Okay.
And Windows can deal with // so I can use the Linux / slashes for paths and everything.
Right.
But yeah.
I'm trying to think where we are right now.
I've skipped over a number of slides, so we can go back and look at some of those maybe.
Yeah, so well, let's talk a bit more about the tokenizer stuff that we were talking about earlier, because you had some slides about that.
Yeah, let me go back. Yeah. Right, so yeah, what are tokenizer changes we need to take into account for PHPCS?
Yes. Yeah.
And sorry if I'm coughing, I'm a smoker, sorry. I don't have COVID.
That's good.
The tokenizer changes, these are things which have an impact on PHPCS. Match expressions, obviously we will have to backfill.
Yes.
Completely.
Yeah.
So we need to match as a name, which is tokenized as a T-string in other versions, and then realize it's a control structure and treat it in every single other way as a control structure, and including saying, okay, everything within the curly braces of the match has match as a condition. Right. So there's interesting challenges there. And also, if object operators are actually reasonably easy to backfill. Common tokenization is another interesting one. This is a change which literally only impacts people who work with tokens, and that's probably 3 projects: PHPCS, CS Fixer, and PHP Parser. Well, and there are more. I mean, PHPDocumentor does work with it as well. But yeah, it's a very limited pool of projects.
Most of the userland code won't be using it.
No, they will never even realize there's an impact there. But what happens there is If you have a single line slash comment, the new line at the character at the end of that comment used to be tokenized within that comment as, you know, T-comment token. As of PHP 8, that new line is tokenized with the white space of the next new line.
Okay. Okay.
Where that, in PHPCS itself, it broke about 60 sniffs.
Do you ever wonder why they make such changes?
I know why this change was made.
There is a reason behind it. Or?
Well, I mean, yeah, yes and no. To be quite fair, I never understood why it was tokenized like that in the first place. So it does make things a lot more logical, but it breaks history. And considering how many external standards are built on top of PHPCS, for PHPCS the choice was, okay, so do we now standardize all the PHP versions to the PHP 8 tokenization, or are we just going to undo the change?
Right.
If we standardize on the PHP 8 tokenization, it would basically mean that every sniff which does something with comments, whether it is skip over them or do something with it, would need to be adjusted. And if we undo the change, it saves people a lot of work.
Yes, yeah.
So we've undone the change.
Right.
Or rather, I undid the change. And it's been merged and released already.
So with things like this, what makes you decide to undo the change or not undo the change?
Largely the impact on external standards, and on our own sniffs as well. And I'm saying I'm the biggest outside contributor to PHPCS. I'm not a project owner. I don't have commit rights. Yeah. But I also maintain 4 external standards. So yeah. I can gauge what the impact is quite easily. Say union types. That's a good example actually for that. So union types uses the bitwise OR operator to separate types.
Yeah.
Now there's quite a few sniffs out there which will look at operator spacing. So most of the time, if it's an arithmetic operator or a bitwise operator in another context, you would want spaces around that. So in a catch statement, for exceptions, most of the time you'll have an exception name, space, bitwise OR, space, next exception name. And you'd want sniffs to check it and fix that automatically. If we would have left the tokenization the way it was, things would work. But all those operators spacing sniffs would start fixing that, and would start adding space within your union type.
Right.
It would work in PHP. PHP will just disregard that white space. But we figured most people probably wouldn't want that. And that it was probably a better idea to create a completely new token which is custom for PHPCS. It doesn't exist in the PHP tokenizer, but within PHPCS it will now exist, called T-union type. So that operator has now, it is the bitwise OR operator, but it now has a different name, so you can distinguish when the bitwise OR token is used as a union type separator or as bitwise OR.
This is the decision to basically make it more understandable, more readable, or
more easily prevent bugs and make things more easily detectable.
Right.
Think arrow functions. You have yet another use for double arrow. We already had yield, we already had the arrays, and now we have arrow functions, and with match we now have match expressions. So that's more uses of the double arrow.
Yeah.
If you have an array sniff which does alignment of the double arrows, where, you know, this is a very common thing. When is the arrow from an arrow function and when is the arrow from the array?
Yeah. So you split it up
we've actually again created another token for that, because an arrow function can be the value in an array.
Yeah, yeah, that makes sense.
And an array key can be an expression, so it would be really, really hard to distinguish if we didn't. Let's put it this way: if we put the burden on the tokenizer, it saves every single sniff dealing with double arrows having to do the same thing.
Yeah, yeah.
So we created a separate token for that.
Has there been one specific tokenizer change for you that you thought, how the hell are we going to do this?
Arrow function.
Oh, okay, so that's the one, and that's the...
Well, the attributes, if we're talking PHP 8 attributes, I've very, very purposefully not looked at it yet.
Okay.
First of all, because it's still in flux. Second of all, I honestly don't even know where to start.
Yeah.
To backfill that properly without breaking existing sniffs is going to be quite a challenge. And we're going to have to see how we're going to do it.
Are you in touch with the core developers about this? About
with the PHP core developers?
The PHP core developers?
Yes.
And do they listen to your input?
Yes, I have the feeling that some do.
Okay, yeah.
I mean, I spoke out about the problems I foresaw with the double @ syntax for attributes. I don't speak out that often. When I do speak out, I normally do have a legitimate concern. Right. I mean, ignore me, that's fine. But I can actually back the concern up with arguments. So Derek and Joe Ferguson and me had a conversation in which I explained what the impact would be and what the impact of the different syntaxes would be. So like if, for instance, the hash with square brackets would be used, a hash in PHP 7 and PHP 5 is seen as a comment. With multi-line attributes, that would still be a problem. But with single-line attributes, nothing breaks.
Right.
So the only thing which would then break would be mid-line attributes.
Yeah.
Because everything after that would be regarded as a comment. So no matter what choice is being made, things will break with attributes. We try to limit the impact and I mean, and explain to core developers our concerns of what it will break. I mean, if you have an attribute and and PR12 starts changing the code within the attribute, that is wrong. That's not the intention. Yeah. So we try to prevent that.
Okay. Given we're almost out of time, basically to summarize, there's a huge impact that a new major version has on QA tools like PHP Code Sniffer, PHPUnit, etc., etc. What is there anything that people can do to help?
Oh, absolutely. Most of these tokenizer changes for PHPCS, for instance, are currently being made by either Greg Sherwood or me. Okay. There are a few other people who definitely try to send in PRs once the tokenizer change has been made to fix up sniffs. Right. And often those are maintainers of external standards, again, will see the impact for their users. Yep. But yeah, contributors to these projects are very welcome. It does require quite some specialized knowledge and really, really, really in-depth knowledge of PHP. And, and that's not meant as a brag. It just, I mean, I've learned so much from doing this work. In that sense, it's extremely valuable. And being creative and being able to write the most horrific code possible is also very helpful. Right. Yeah. Yeah. So it helps us create better unit tests.
There is a question in Discord. Do you have a preference for the syntax? I'm assuming that goes for the attributes.
I very much was leaning to the hash with the square brackets, but they've added a fifth option now, and I'm trying to think what it is. It is still with brackets, but I think it's the @ sign with the brackets.
Okay.
And I think altogether, that might now be the best option.
Okay.
But I don't have voting rights. I can speak up. I can share my concerns, and I do have a feeling those are being listened to. Joe and Derek created an amendment RFC, which I think is coming up for vote very soon, if not has gone into voting this week. So I can only hope that people will understand the concerns, and we're not the only project we're running into this.
No.
And about 60% of all PHP projects which do something with code style quality and everything use PHPCS. So it's not as if the impact is small if this goes wrong.
Yeah, exactly. There are some more questions, but I think we're gonna have to answer them directly in Discord because it is already quarter to 1. So the other questions we'll take them in the Discord, which means that I want to thank you very much for coming over here to Amersfoort, for having a chat with me, basically, for blowing my mind with all of the complex stuff that you've been explaining.
It's always a pleasure to talk with you, Stefan.
Thank you very much.